So hello everybody, welcome to International Women's Day. I'd like to introduce you to our wonderful panel, including Linda Wells, Michelle Redman and Jodie Cooper. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and elders past and present. And I'm in Gumbaynggirr country today. We are spread all over Australia, from Tasmania to Victoria. And Jodie, are you in Victoria as well? Jodie can answer that in a minute. You're in Victoria? No. Yes.
Tasmania.
In Tassie as well. Okay, sorry about that. Well, that's good. We have the island state well and truly represented. So what I'd like to do to begin with, this is our final panel for the day, and the theme is self-care and balance. And the first speaker is certainly somebody that assists me on a weekly basis to make sure I'm looking after my self-care and balance, both through her company ERAW and also through being a very incredibly decent human being and a friend. So I'd like to introduce you, Linda Wells.
Oh, you're talking about me. Hi, everybody. Happy International Women's Day. I'm Linda Wells from ERAW. So I own a business called ERAW, which shows employees how to eat right at work, exercise right at work, and improve their overall well-being. I had been in the corporate world for more than 25 years when I started to see the culture in the workplace was one of unhealthy food, drinks, birthday celebrations, etc., were always sugary food and sugary drinks or alcohol, and a sedentary way of working, which has, since COVID happened, has got worse. I read an article just the other day, actually, that had this great title that said, "Why Sitting is the New Smoking." So it was interesting. So I started to see this culture wasn't working for staff members or businesses, think sick leave, staff turnover, etc. I started a company at that time called It's Up to You, and it was a workplace face-to-face training company on healthy eating at work, workshops with employees, local government councils, water boards, etc. Then I moved away from New South Wales 1 year ago on Saturday, and 5 minutes later, COVID happened. So I was in a new place. I had no business connections, no friends. There was no possible way I could, bring my business here and run face-to-face workshops. So I started a digital training business called ERAW, Eat Right at Work, and put all my courses online, which interestingly enough, I had wanted to do for more than 5 years. I also run virtual workshops with teams as well, which has been fun. But I'm going to leave for International Women's Day, I'm going to leave the business of ERAW alone for this talk and focus on how I improve my own overall well-being. So obviously I spruik to people to eat good food. So I eat good food. I exercise for 30 minutes a day and I do 10,000 steps each day. You can ask Kerry if I do that, because we are accountability buddies on that at the moment, and I do achieve that goal every day. I have lots of collaboration with people, which is what ERAW is all about, but that doesn't guarantee that I'm going to have a stressful life. To improve our overall well-being, we have to focus on our minds as well. We can make changes to our daily behaviour, and just small changes. Keep it simple. If you know me, like the real Linda, you know that what I do want to do is change the world via healthy eating and exercise and overall well-being. But a person has a family environment, a work environment, a social environment, but a narrative in their own personal mind. And let's discover how to improve our overall well-being by changing that narrative in our minds. And you're going to understand more from Jodie and Michelle as well. So here's what I do. When I'm frustrated, resentful, or angry about something, and I can't seem to let it go, I pause, I stop, I write it down, just write it all down. I look at it. There's always multiple choices. My first choice is always the wrong one, so I don't do anything. And a lot of the times after I delve into it, I don't do anything at all. It's not about others. It's about the narrative in my own head. So here's how. So pause, address the situation, reread the words that I've written down, talk to someone. I'm privileged to have a lot of people available to talk to, from strong women, mentors, best friends, family. So I access them, and I don't know everything, okay? And here's a tip. If you ask them to listen to you, you are showing them that you'll listen to them. It's like two-way mentoring. We are all in this together. It works. So don't let it stay in your head, particularly not my head. Here's a tip. If it's a workplace anger or resentment, reach for somebody outside of the workplace to talk about it. That way it doesn't become gossip. If it's a family member, talk to a friend about it. And that way it doesn't become a family split on opinions. So here's a recent example of pausing and looking at a situation. I'm engaged on social media for my eRaw business, and I did a post on my private social media platform that was earth-shatteringly amazing for me. And I pressed post and I waited for it to explode. And only a handful of people liked it. And then I posted a picture of some broccoli from my garden on a social media post, and it went off. And that wasn't the one that I expected to go off. So I have a problem, and I'm resentful and I'm angry and I'm not feeling valued or important. But as Eckhart Tolle would say, is it really a problem or is it just a situation? So removing the narrative problem and moving it into accepting the situation. It's the reality of what is. People liked my broccoli more than they liked my post about whatever. I can't change that. Accepting that reality of what is rather than what should be, like my expectation of what should have happened, is how I change my mindset. So if I hear myself say, this is a problem, switch the wording to, well, that's interesting. It's just a situation, plus it's just today, and see how easier it is to calm down and let it go and actually laugh about it. How important is it? Like, really? It's a social media post. It's not life-threatening, not life-changing, not all-consuming. It's social media. In the greater scheme of things, it's not that important. Move on. Focus on my real goal, which is to show people how to eat vegetables, like, broccoli. When I pause and look at these feelings, write them down and analyze them, I often end up laughing at my own ridiculousness. You're welcome to laugh at these thoughts too. Plus, maybe identify some of your own situations like this and turn anger into laughter. So that inner narrative in my head, is it me or is it my ego? Like, is it really me or is it just my ego? Lots of people on this workshop today probably know me, like the real me, but you wouldn't recognize me if I handed you a script written by my ego. My ego always needs to be right and needs everybody else to be wrong. So it's not me, it's my ego seeking validation and praise, when in fact my passion is to change the world, change people's eating habits and exercise habits, not their social media habits. I laugh now at my ego-driven narrative. It's like a person approaching me in a dark alley with a long raincoat on, looking left and right to see if anybody's watching, and then opening up the raincoat and it's full of yellow stickies with negative sentences about me, negative ideas and negative values. I look at that hawker and I just laugh and say, seriously? And guess what? It runs away. So negative thinking and thoughts in my mind do not assist my overall well-being. They just feed that sense of righteousness. I like to think I'm the best social media influencer on the planet. Well, no, I don't. That's my ego. I'm not a social media influencer. That isn't my goal either. Why I use social media is to show people what 5 serves of vegetables looks like, not gather likes for it. It's to motivate people to eat those fresh food. And seriously, some teams I've worked with recently had to ask me, what is 5 vegetables? So I need to stay focused on my deeper, my true heart goal. And that's what's important. I just had a person direct message me the other day on Instagram saying, thank you for posting something about dehydrating some food. I've had a dehydrator for 6 years, Linda, and now I'm using it again with my apples and tomatoes. Thank you for the inspiration. Now that is my goal achieved right there, not the nonsense in my mind. Another thing to identify that I am focused on the future, not the past. So, you know, that future, like sitting here on International Women's Day with 3 amazing women that I've known for a long time, 2 of them, and just the last sort of 6 months, 1 of them, but find them so inspirational and so valuable to me. You know, that corny saying, I'm sorry to say it, but, you know, yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery, today's a gift. And that's why we call it the present. So to improve our overall well-being, we should learn to focus on the present, like today, like right here, International Women's Day. I generally have that gift today to be here right now with you. I don't have broccoli in my hand or on my desk, just you and me. What a gift. So often though, you're here, but you want to be over there. So let's just be here right now in the place that exists. And we can only really make changes in the place that exists. So I'd like to stop talking now and listen to some of the other people on the panel. Thank you. Kerry, your sound is off, and I think you are saying that you've done 5,000 steps.
That's the second time I've done that today. The picture painted 1,000 words. Well interpreted. Halfway there, Linda.
Good, and it's not even. There's only just 12 o'clock, so you'll nail it today.
So, Michelle, I'd like to hand over to you now. You have round about 10 minutes, and we'll ask some questions right at the end.
Okay, terrific, thank you. Firstly, I'd just like to thank you all, Linda in particular, for this opportunity, and Systems 1357, and Kerry, thank you for meeting you. And I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, which is where my studio has sat for the last 15 years. I thought I'd start with a story about me. I've never done this sort of thing before, so I'm the newbie, so I'm going to start right from the beginning and talk about how I was a nurse. I lived a sort of beautiful life. I live in a commune on a mountaintop outside of Melbourne. I could see the city lights from the back of my garden, and I lived with 30 families in this idyllic place. And every day that I nursed, I drove in my car for an hour to get to work, and then I'd be running around the emergency department and then drive an hour back, come home, cook dinner, have a glass of wine, fall asleep, get up and be on this. I was on this roller coaster. And then one day the ambulance guys brought in this person who was very overweight and had a mild heart attack. Fortunately, it was only a mild heart attack. And the frontline people looked after this person, and then I was the psychosocial assessor. So I came in, and this very overweight person said to me, if I hadn't been vacuuming, this would never have happened to me. And I'm like, whoa, oh, okay, a little discombobulated, but okay. But the discombobulation was because I started reflecting that person towards myself. It was like they were a mirror for me. And it was like, wow, okay. Anyway, I did the assessment, constantly thinking about myself actually after that moment, but fortunately it wasn't a bad heart attack, so they probably survived. And I went off into the tea room and I sat down and I thought, wow, like, that could be me. Like, I was 45, I was 10 kilos overweight. I wasn't particularly passionate about nursing anymore, but I felt I had a lot to give. Like, I always wanted a full life, and I had this perfect life on the mountaintop, you know, living the dream. So why was I unhappy? And I was like, I was overweight. I was probably very menopausal. So at lunchtime, I went for a walk, and I walked around the block, and I came back and I was like, oh, I feel so good, you know, like I was so in control, like this is it. Oh my God, I've got to walk, you know. And I had been an athlete. Like, I'd been a very active person the previous 10 years before getting on the mountaintop and then being dependent on a car. And I rode a bicycle to work, but then I had to get in the car to go to work. And it took a lot of time. So anyway, I thought, I walked before I got in the car. I went for a walk before I left home. At lunchtime, I went for a walk, and I felt myself changing. I was clear-headed. I was elated. I ate less junk because I felt better. I ate less junk. The hormones were starting to move from my gut to my brain. I slept better. And I thought, this is fantastic. I'm gonna change my life, you know, like, and medicine is fantastic. Hospitals are great, but they're reactive environments. You go to a hospital because you need someone to react to help you. And all of a sudden I realized I wanted to be proactive and I wanted to prevent these things from happening. So Pilates was helping me with my back pain, my nurse's back, which I'd always had for a long, long time. And walking was making me feel fabulous. So I thought I'd become a personal trainer. And so I did. And I bought a big red panel van and I had all my equipment in this panel van, and I went to community centres and I went to people's homes, and I was having a great time changing the world, like Linda says, well, changing people in the valley one person at a time. But it was so enlivening for me to see people become alive themselves, like their body would just change, their body would change, their mind would change. So I'm now saying that movement is medicine. 85% of illnesses are improved with movement. You don't have to be a boot camper. You don't have to be a jogger to improve your life. You just have to move. And the body loves movement. Like I always say to my customers, you know, we don't pick turnips from the tundra. We don't collect wood, and we're not collecting water anymore. We're actually quite contained in, like we are here today, in small environments, on Zoom. Most of us, or a lot of people, have got a phone, an iPad, a computer, a television. We have media screens in our houses, and the gardens are getting smaller and the TV rooms are getting bigger. So I call it this disconnect. You know, there's the head, and then there's this thing that carries us around a little bit, not very much anymore, to the car. So I'm big on, you know, I'm convinced movement is medicine. I say to people, you can't exercise away a bad diet. You know, you have to eat well. And the beauty is when you move, you start to like yourself more. And so I say discipline is love. You know, self-discipline is self-love. Movement gives you the discipline to eat well. Movement just naturally enables you to sleep better. People's menopause is so much enhanced. I say, just coming to the classes, I don't have all these symptoms. It's like, you don't really need me, you need movement. I'm just the catalyst. Or I count people accountable is how I see it. You know, they turn up, they feel good, and hopefully that rolls out into the rest of their week. And I have a story just recently. Since COVID, a couple of women in their 80s have joined the online groups. They're 80-year-olds. One of them's still a pilot, you know, but all of a sudden she says, I need to keep going. You're like, I need to come and see you because I don't want to get sick and I feel good. And I didn't know I could do this with my body. I didn't realize that. Where have you been? It's like, well, I've been here, but you know, you're obviously busy. And just watching this, so she's sent her friend and her friend has sent her friend. So I've got these half a dozen women all turning 80 this year or next year, wanting to live in their bodies because they've often been academics or they've been very heady people, and they're opening up and realizing without their bodies, they can't hang around, you know, like they've got to keep alive through their body. And so, and it doesn't have to be hard movement. I'm sort of working with what I call soft movement a little bit more as I'm aging. And that's like Qigong. It's like Qigong is the Chinese medicine movement. And in China, they do that in hospitals. People do Qigong. And the other thing I'm really connected or interested in is breath. Like Linda talked about writing down how to get out of her head and decrease the stress. I have people come in like this. And then when we take a few breaths, they're like this. Because this triangle, you know, the trapezius muscles, getting a bit technical, they're called the traps. They trap everything. They trap your mental energy, your physical energy. They trap your lack of sleep. you know, the repetitive strain industries of computer, mouse, arm, you know, like. So my biggest thing at the moment is teaching people to stand upright and breathe well. And I say to people in their offices, I'm not sure if I'm running out of time, people in their offices, your toilet is your best friend. That tiny little cubicle, because you can go in there, sit down and take 3 breaths. And 3 breaths will de-stress. Seriously, if we're open to it, I'd really like to do 3 breaths with people here today, because it dissipates the cortisol. We have the stress, we have the stress, we have the stress, and we don't breathe. So it's nowhere to, you know, that's why I breathe out. It gets rid of the cortisol, the hormones attached to moisture. You let out moisture when you breathe out. So I think maybe you could just think about your own levels of tension. Kerry, you've probably been really busy today holding this together, and just, if we just close.
The shoulder pads, not.
As long as they can move up and down is the most important thing, as long as they don't get stuck.
Would you like to do 3 breaths, Michelle? Then we can move on to Jodie.
I think it'd be, if we can, just momentarily just think about your own stress, or just how your body's feeling, and then close your eyes, and we'll do it together. So just closing your eyes and just breathe in softly, not a big breath, and just hold it for a moment. And now let the breath out. And then do that again. Just softly breathe in. And hold it. And breathe out. And once more, softly breathe in. And hold it. And breathe out. Just feel the breath and open your eyes.
That was fabulous. I completely agree with you with breathing. I actually started singing lessons 2 years ago as a way to deal with stress and anxiety, and breathing is such a big component of that, and it's been life-changing.
Yeah, singing's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
So now we're going to move on to you, Jodie, to share your whatever it is that you would like to share about self-care and balance. I'm really appreciating hearing these stories as well. It's such a lovely way to have our third panel delivered.
Kerry. So it was, I'm a big believer, particularly this last year, of energy and timing. So Michelle, for me, that 3 breaths just before it's my turn to speak was just the perfect introduction. Thank you. So my background's in positive psychology, and there's a bit of a misunderstanding in the mental health space around positive psychology. A lot of people think of positive psychology as being happyology. It's not. There's a really hard evidence around it. And so I'll share some of that with you, but I'd also like to share a bit of the backstory about how I kind of came into this and what that looks like. So I've been coaching for 15 years. I've had my own coaching practice privately. And as I was working with clients, people would ask me, well, why does that work? Why should I use a gratitude journal? Or why should I exercise more? Or why this or why that? And I got really curious about, well, life coaching for me never really answered those questions. And the more I looked, the more I researched, the more I came across this amazing field of positive psychology. And that was really only around 20 years old. So it started in 1997. When Marty Seligman, who was the president of the American Psychological Association at the time, said, "We've spent enough time understanding disease and disorder. It is time to reorientate the entire field of psychology and start to learn about what is best in mankind, what makes human beings thrive. How do we bring out the best in organizations? How do we create a shift in our environment and with our human beings where we can all improve and we can all reach our potential?" And so when I started to learn about positive psychology, for me, everything clicked. And that was, gosh, almost 10 years ago. I went to uni and I got my master's in applied positive psychology at Melbourne. And we had this beautiful plan to leave home, which was Wollongong in New South Wales, and travel for a couple of years with our children in a caravan around Australia. And like all the best laid plans, it went to pot really quickly. But when we drove out of our home, we rented out our house, we drove down the street, and I'll never forget, I said to myself, Xavier Rudd was playing on the radio. And I said to myself, with tears dripping down my eyes, because I was saying goodbye to my dog and my house, let go of what you think this year needs to be. Let go of what you think it should be and just embrace what comes. And I feel so incredibly blessed that that was the start of my journey. So that was 2019 in November. We got chased down the coast by bushfires for the first couple of months of our trip. And it just shifted our holiday. And then when we got to Tasmania, we had 5 weeks on the West Coast, which was amazing. But then COVID happened, obviously. And so in March last year, we got a knock on our caravan door and they said, you have 24 hours to leave. All caravan parks were closed, all state parks were closed, all free camps were closed, and the boat out was fully booked. So we had to pivot pretty quickly. And so having that, well, let's just see what the universe does. And we focused on what we wanted to create. We said, well, if we're not going to go home, which was New South Wales, what would be our ideal scenario? And so my husband and I sat down and we said, what's the best case scenario now? All right, well, we both get jobs and we find a really nice house and we settle down for a little while and then see what happens when COVID passes. Within 24 hours, we had a beautiful holiday home and I had a role with council in mental health. And so that whole letting go of what we thought it had to be and embracing what is, for me, I guess almost typifies that piece of positive psychology, which is when you focus on the good, you get more good. And it's quite simple. One of the challenges, though, is that our brains have this negativity bias. And if you think about what our brains do, we have over 80,000 thoughts every single day. And so our brains end up like, like a monkey with symbols just churning around. And so after 80,000 thoughts, most of us need, wine or something, whatever the end of the day looks like. And so if we all have that negativity bias, it makes sense then that we have this pandemic of anxiety and depression, particularly in the space where we're in at the moment. We know that 1 in 5 Australians experience a mental health challenge each year. The scary part of that, though, is that over 54% of people never actually access treatment. So when we're talking about those statistics, that's 20% of our population. But most people are never, ever going to talk to a friend, a GP. They're not going to get a mental health plan, and they're not actually going to move out of that space. And for me, that was a scary thing. When I was at uni, the work that I did was, my background's kind of more in that corporate space. And the work that I did was on how pro-social behavior or being good human beings in the workplace actually prevents mental illness. And one of the statistics that I came across was that only 18% of Australians in Australian workplaces feel like their colleagues genuinely care about them. Only 18%. And so if we think about that in terms of our mental health, one of the most important things that we can do is just demonstrate to others that we care about them. And if we're consistently doing that, not just for others, but also for ourselves, everything changes. There was a beautiful study that was done with MS sufferers, so people with multiple sclerosis. They did it over 3 years, and they took half of the group and asked them to receive a carer call each week. So they didn't have to do anything. Their phone would ring and somebody would be on the other end saying, hi, how are you? How's your week going? Have you got access to this or that? The other half of MS sufferers, group B, were asked to choose a friend or associate and place a care call each week. Now, over the 3 years, obviously their well-being ebbed and flowed, but what happened was the people who placed the call experienced more meaning from placing the call than did the people who were simply getting it. And what we learned about well-being from that experiment was that it isn't simply being cared for that's important. In terms of our mental health, it is actually much more important that we show and demonstrate care to others. And that's a way for us to feel motivated, engaged, and purposeful in what we do in our days. There's some really interesting research around positive emotions, and I'll share it with you because I think it counters the negative emotions so beautifully. If you think of that negativity bias, that we all pay 3 times as much attention to a negative event or emotion than we do to a positive, it's a little bit scary. But what Barbara Friedrichsen found in her research was that when we experience positive emotion, so if you think in your mind something funny, interesting, engaging that happened, my little boy who's 8 is learning to fly a drone. And so this morning he's figuring out how to do backflips with it. And the fact that the drone has not yet crashed and broken is amazing. So that's my positive emotion. But even in my mind, when I flip back to that memory, my brain gets a little hit of serotonin or dopamine or oxytocin or endorphins. And so each of those neurotransmitters inside my brain, they allow my brain to open up a little bit more and shift my perspective. So I'm more likely to connect, to learn. I'm more likely to grow or take on challenges. I'm more open to meeting new people. And so when my brain's in this position, I'm likely to learn and grow, which makes me feel great. And so if we come back, Michelle, to that point about how we feel about ourselves defines what we do next. And so if I feel good after going for a walk, I'm much more likely to go for another walk. But all positive emotions do that for us. And now we understand what positive emotions do. We can be really mindful about consciously constructing them. So if we have, you wake up and let's say you watch the news. I'm assuming that you guys don't watch the news because you're more educated than that. Let's say you watch the news and then your coffee's cold and then your car doesn't start and you've got these negatives weighing up in your day. If we don't consciously and deliberately construct the positives, then our day starts to look like this really quickly by default. Not because we're good or bad people, but by default of our brain paying more attention to this side of the equation than this. And so we need to consciously go about our day, either constructing or noticing the positives. It doesn't mean your day has to look like, puppy dogs and walks on the beach and, lovely ice creams, or maybe broccoli if you're Linda. But it's about you noticing. I'll never forget working with a guy who had a young family, and we talked about gratitude, and he said, I've just got, there's no joy in my life. There's nothing. And he had a young family. And I said, well, what about when the kids giggle? And he's like, no, I don't feel any positive emotion at all. And I said, I don't want you to change anything you do. Don't change a thing, but I do want you to tune into it differently. I want you to bring that present moment awareness to your day. And so if your children laugh, I want you to notice. If the sun's shining, then I want you to notice. If there's a bird that flits by, I want you to notice it. And he came back next week and he said, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. I had no idea how many good things there were in my life because I'd never seen them before. And I specifically said to him, don't change anything. You don't have to start walking. You don't have to eat better. You don't have to just become aware. And I think so often in our society, we get really focused on what we have to do differently. And a lot of what I love about positive psychology is so much of it starts with where our focus is. And so, my time in Tasmania has been an absolute blessing, but it's coming to an end. Come Easter, we're actually hitting the road to finish our journey around Australia, and just, keep the adventures going. So, yeah.
Thanks, Jodie.
Thanks.
So when I hear all of you speak about wellness, happiness, leading a positive life, you make it sound really, really simple. But we all know, I guess in the beginning at least, it doesn't always really feel that way. It can feel quite difficult to get started. So what are your best tips on initiating and sustaining your wellness?
Can I jump in? This is something I'm really passionate about, because I think when I started in life coaching, it was almost the opposite. And people would be desperate to set their goals and to meet their goals. And everything that I've learned now about motivation and willpower and the science and psychology of it, we talk about tiny nudges. So whatever you do, you know, in my perspective, don't set these massive goals, create a tiny nudge and then develop a habit around that. So like Michelle, you go for that one walk and it feels good, you're more likely to go for another walk. Or you create that one meal, you're more likely to do it again, because every time we experience that positive emotion, we're able to build on that. So that would be my hot tip, tiny nudges.
Thanks, Jodie. Linda?
Michelle? Okay. Well, mine, and I've been doing this for probably 16 years. When there's something like that, I don't focus on me, try to be of service to someone else. So just take all the pressure off myself and be of service, do something, be kind in some way, shape or form to someone else, and that erases it.
Thanks, Linda. How about you, Michelle?
I just would be part of what Jodie's talking about, just the very small thing, like lower the expectation. You know, like people say to me, oh, can you write out a whole list of the exercises, or you could do that. And I say to them, where's your mat? Like, just keep the mat in the lounge room. You know, like if you want to do it, but you've got to go out in the garage and do it, or you know, it's too hard to get outside. If you just stand on the mat and the body, I just think if you stand on the mat and breathe in, your body will show you the way. If you just give yourself that little bit of space to do a little bit, as opposed to being, it's too hard, I haven't got time to do that. Just like Jodie says, just that tiny little bit. So I guess I'm pretty similar with what Jodie says.
Yeah, nudges sound important.
Yeah, just you know, just take 3 breaths, or you know, put your arms up in the air and swing them about. And the next thing you know, you might create a little bit of energy to do what you wanted to do.
Yeah. In the last panel, we talked about how important setting up the right environment for change, or to sustain living by your values in that case, or living your identity is. Can you talk to just a little bit, sometimes we don't have a choice about the people who are in our environment, which, and of course that point could be argued as well, but it might be part of that, what's that sum equal, 48, no, I'm trying to do 100 minus 18. That's terribly silly. It might be that 80% of people that don't support you, or you feel that don't care about you in the workforce. Or it could be maybe it's somebody that's isolated at home, or it could be a lot of different things. But how do you recommend that people navigate the influences of other people in maintaining their wellness?
I've got something that I've learned from COVID, actually. And so say I'm in a workplace and I'm not feeling valued or respected or whatever. One thing that I've done since COVID, my family has connected every week. We have a Wells family catch up every Wednesday. And we're across all different locations. And COVID's shown me just how important and how much I love my 5 brothers, my 1 sister, and my 6 nieces, right? So if in the workplace something's not going well, and it might be awkward and, you know, might be some conflict or whatever, I actually just say to myself, okay, well, is it family? Nope. Okay, it's not that important. You know, the thing that is the most important thing that I've learned in 2020 was family. So if there was conflict with family, I'd probably break down, but there isn't any. But if it was a workplace one, I can get through it all. It's not family, so it's not that important.
Thanks, Linda. How about you, Michelle?
Well, if I'm just what I'm thinking about, if I have some people in difficult situations, and I say to people, choose your strawberry friends, not your Tim Tam friends.
I like that.
You know.
Michelle, I'm not sure how we're going to get on.
You know, like, because some people are surrounded by what I call saboteurs, like it may not sound very nice, but if I think about a few women who are trying to lose weight and they've got their strong social connections, but they're often their historical connections and they've got stories and agendas that they've not cleared or I just say, well, now's the time not to hang out with them until you feel stronger in yourself to hang out with them. You've got to hang out with the person that brings you a strawberry, not a Tim Tam.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not always easy for people, and people stay in very difficult situations if I'm thinking about the family. And that's where the outdoors, I guess, comes in. Is like if then you just get outdoors, just go to the letterbox and take 3 breaths,
Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah.
How about you, Jodie?
I guess for me, I've been very, very conscious of, I'm an introvert. So my work obviously is a lot more extroverted. So people are surprised by me being an introvert. But if I have 2 or 3 close friends, then I'm okay. And so regardless of situations or relationships that ebb and flow, and that I think we all have those relationships in our life, whether it's in a workplace or in our family sometimes, making sure that I have 2 or 3 people that have just got my back no matter what. And if I have them, then I'm okay. One of the things, I guess, a couple of points with it, a lot of the work we do in Pos Psych is around strengths. So acknowledging our own strengths, but also seeing other people's. And when you can bring a strengths-based language to conflict, it really shifts how you think. So one of my key strengths is optimism. It does my boss's head in because I constantly think that I can, whereas that's not his strength. One of his strengths is perseverance and getting through things. And so when we can understand and those strengths, we can see them, it makes some of those conversations easier. The other thing that I'm mindful of is never letting anybody walk through my mind with muddy feet. I think that's a really good saying. It's, people can say what they want, but I always have the ability to choose how I respond, and that holding equanimity and continually choosing to be kind, or at the very least walking away, is how I choose to be, as opposed to buying into, arguments or conflict.
Thanks, Jodie. Now, just have one final question, which I think a lot of the listeners will really, really understand. The question's about uncertainty and how people can deal with uncertainty. Linda Marshall's just said, well done, ladies, great session. Everything in life is a choice. So in terms of, thank you, Linda, in terms of dealing with uncertainty, now some of us, I have a very high threshold for uncertainty. In fact, I don't really believe in certainty myself. But that, I realise as a leader, really freaks people out. So how do you suggest that people can deal with and lead well in uncertain times to ensure that the people around them also maintain their wellness?
Well, I think all of us have learnt from COVID, because it was the most uncertain time, and we have been very privileged in Australia and New Zealand to not have gone through what Europe's gone through. So a lot of us have positive things that have come out of those uncertain times. So I think to have that thought that every crisis is a breadcrumb to something better, and for a lot of us, we have realised that through a global pandemic, there has been, and I feel terrible saying this because of countries that have gone through horrific things, but yeah, it's been breadcrumbs to other things. So for me, it was a breadcrumb to putting my business digital online, which I'd wanted to do for 5 years and had never done it.
So might I sum that up, Linda, as both perspective and also maintaining positivity in the story that you're telling yourself? Yeah.
And keep going.
Yeah, and keep going. Thank you. How about you, Michelle?
I guess what I do is, I've been a meditator for a long, long time. So if I get into uncertain situations, I always just say, feel my feet. Where are my feet? So it's a big thing about just grounding myself and encouraging other people just to ground. You know, I've got one very brief story where a client came and she'd never been on a plane and she was fearful. So finally she was going to fly to Darwin. And I said to her, just feel your feet, like just sit there. And she texted me back, I'm hanging on to my toes. You know, it worked for her. She was sat in and really just hang on to her toes. So I always remember that story. And it's that like taking the breath. I guess that's my thing. I'm a meditator. So it's just sitting with it, because at that time, you know, uncertainty is a story, and you know, you're anticipating. So if you're grounded, you're breathing, and you feel your feet, you're busy, and things can come from there, I think. You know.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. How about you, Jodie?
I go back. There's two pieces. One was when my children were very little, and both of them were born very close together, and they just screamed for many years. And on my whiteboard, I had, there is only this moment and it too shall pass. Mm-hmm. And that was, I hold on to that. I still come back to that, because particularly in positive psychology, it's not all happy la lollipops and puppy dogs. It's not. Life is hard, you know, and giving yourself permission to have that meltdown, like we're in the realms of packing up our house and packing up our life again and moving. And yesterday I just stood in the kitchen and cried because I'm giving my beautiful Mexican plates away and I'm not taking them with us. I thought, you know what, that's okay. Like, and I think we try to skip through some of that mess of life and not embrace it. Like, this is hard. Our brains are not designed for uncertainty. Our brains are designed for tribal groups of about 21 people who live together and hunt together and work together. We are not designed for global pandemics. And so the uncertainty that we're all experiencing is really, it's exhausting emotionally for all of us. So giving ourselves permission, and then coming back to Michelle's point of just one moment at a time, like just in this moment, what can we notice and what can we embrace?
Thanks, Jodie. So that brings us to the end of the panel. And I'll tell you what, ladies, if I was a Twitter person, I would have enough tweets to last me about 24 months, I reckon, starting with the picture of the broccoli and working through. Some of the quotes that I wrote down, never let anyone walk through your mind with muddy feet, which I really love that one. And Linda, right in the beginning, you said good food, steps and movement. So it sounds like a pretty easy motto to life.
Yeah.
We took 3 breaths. Is it really a problem or is it just a situation? Thank you, Eckhart Tolle by Linda. Negative thinking doesn't help you achieve your goals. More likely to connect, learn and grow when you're happy and positive. And I love what you were saying, Michelle, as well about movement, and coupling that with what Jodie said about goals as well. It's so funny. I even think in my own health journey that it always has to be, you know, do this, do that, do something else. And I already feel so relieved that just getting up and moving is it's a good place to start. So I truly want to thank all of you for being here today on the panel. I learned a lot, and I can see a blog post coming on with all of the gold that you've just shared, because I can't possibly summarise it. I'd require an entire separate panel to be able to do that. Thank you all. So to the listeners, make sure you go and introduce yourself to Linda and Jodie on their websites or LinkedIn pages or Facebook, or where do you hang out online, Michelle?
Yeah, I've got a Vitality Moves page and the websites, and I'm not that prolific. I'm in my own little bubble here, but yeah.
That's all right. So Vitality Moves on Facebook.
Vitality Moves, yeah.
eRaw for Linda, and Jodie, your...
Just jodiecooper.com.au.
Jodie. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you all again. Happy International Women's Day, and it's been great to learn from you today. I really, really appreciate it. So we're going to sign out
Kerry.
now, and I hope all of you go off into your International Women's Day feeling happy, healthy, positive, empowered, attached to your values, and living your identity.
Thanks, Kerry. Thanks for hosting.
Thank you.
See you, everyone.
Bye, Linda. Thank you.
Bye.